55 సంవత్సరాల రాజ్యాంగ నిర్మాణం మరియు అంబేద్కర్ పాత్ర అనే అంశంపై జస్టిస్ కొండా మాధవరెడ్డి ఫౌండేషన్ ఆధ్వర్యంలో హైదరాబాద్ దోమలగూడ ఏవీ కళాశాలలో జస్టిస్ కొండా మాధవరెడ్డి స్మారక ఉపన్యాసం జరిగింది. ఈ కార్యక్రమంలో ముఖ్య అతిథులుగా రాజ్యసభ సభ్యులు డాక్టర్ నరేంద్ర దామోదర్ జాదవ్, శాసనసభ స్పీకర్ గడ్డం ప్రసాద్, రాజ్యసభ సభ్యులు డాక్టర్ లక్ష్మణ్, చేవెళ్ల ఎంపీ కొండా విశ్వేశ్వరరెడ్డి పాల్గొన్నారు. దీనిపై అతిథులు మాట్లాడుతూ పాకిస్తాన్, శ్రీలంక, బర్మా లాంటి దేశాలు ఆర్థిక సంక్షోభంలో కొట్టుమిట్టాడుతున్న భారతదేశం మాత్రం స్వాతంత్ర్యం వచ్చి 75 ఏళ్లైనా సుపరిపాలనలో ఉండడానికి అంబేద్కర్ రాజ్యాంగమే కారణమన్నారు. నెహ్రూ నుంచి మోదీ వరకు ఎలాంటి ఇబ్బందులు లేకుండా రాజ్యాంగం కొనసాగుతూ ఉండడానికి అంబేద్కర్ నిర్దేశించిన మార్గాలే కారణమన్నారు.
Has been widely celebrated. His dedication to public service and intellectual excellence continues to inspire many. I myself had the privilege of spending 1 week with him in the University of Chicago, and his vast experience and expertise will undoubtedly provide valuable insights, and we look forward to your lecture, sir. I would also like to welcome former Supreme Court Judge and former Chief Justice of Guwahati High Court, Sudarshan Reddy Garu, but he would requested me to introduce only as a member of the family of Justice Konda Madhav-Reddy. Thank you, sir. Thank you for agreeing to preside over this. We are thankful. To our distinguished guests, Dr. K. Lakshman Garu, one of the highly intellectual members of the Rajya Sabha, a doctorate from the Usmania University. Thank you, sir, for gracing this function. We will shortly be joined by Sri Gaddam Prasad Garu, who was held up, and he is a former minister of Andhra Pradesh and the current speaker. So, in today's global turmoil, after 78 years of independence, the need to protect the unity and integrity of the nation is ever so important. And we look at the Constitution as the guiding light and beacon to take India forward to a Vikasit Bharat. Today, the memorial lecture is a tribute to the legacy of Justice Konda Madhav-Reddy Foundation. We are gathered here to celebrate his contribution to the field of law and justice. Let us take a moment to remember his remarkable life and achievements. The foundation has been doing various charitable works and works that promote development in rural areas, especially focused on children education through scholarship, but also in skill development and job creation. With that, I invite Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu to take the stage and preside over the proceeding. Please join me, sir, in welcoming, and please welcome him with a round of applause.
Honorable Chief Guest, Sri Narendra Jadhav Garu, President of this today's function, Justice Sudarshan Reddy Garu, and my friend Konda Vishweshwar-Reddy Garu, Member of Parliament, and the legacy of Justice Konda Madhav-Reddy Garu. It is indeed a pleasure for me and feel honored to be as one of the guests of honor to take part in this prestigious Justice Konda Madhav-Reddy Garu memorial lecture, and more particularly the 55 years journey of Constitution. The moment I was asked to be present in this today's memorial lecture, I was asking my friend Konda Vishweshwar-Reddy Garu, we know fully well that the Constitution was adopted November 26, 1949. And it has come into force from 26 January 1950. And we have been all celebrating the 75 years of adoption of this Constitution. This Constitution is supposed to be one of the best constitutions provided by the architect of the Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar, the chairman of Draft Committee Constitution. India is supposed to be one of the biggest democratic country in the world. And we're proud to say that India is a mother of democracy. So I was wondering, we have been celebrating 75 years of celebrations. How come it is 55 years journey of Constitution? So even Vishwesh Reddy was also having same doubt. It will be clarified by our today's chief speaker of this today's memorial lecture. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, while framing this constitution, though the liberty, equality and fraternity has been clearly defined, and articles such as 17, this abolition of untouchability, articles 15 and 16, this prohibition of discrimination. He was more concerned and he was committed and he wanted to empower the downtrodden, the weaker sections, the communities which have been discriminated for ages. And we have seen during the constitution framing also many debates have been taken place. Right from the day one, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was differing with Nehruji on certain issues. Whether it is Article 370, Jammu Kashmir being a part of India, so Nehru wanted to be a Jammu Kashmir, a separate constitution and separate assembly with full of powers. And even when the question of Hindu Code Bill has come, again it was Ambedkarji was insisting for Hindu Code Bill, where Nehru was not in favor of this. Likewise, there were many such issues. Ambedkarji was emphasizing reservation for SC, STs in the name of discrimination. But Nehru was always advocating for reservations in the name of economic as a criteria, not as a caste as a criteria. But still, after 75 years of independence, we still see that caste has become a major obstacle. So, being a visionary leader of this country, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, has given us such a beautiful constitution. So, entire country is now debating and discussing on it. Of course, there might have been many amendments keeping in mind the ongoing developments, but the preamble, but the basics of the constitution is not being changed. But still, we have witnessed many such instances, imposition of emergency, and even the misuse or abuse of 356 article we have witnessed. But still, our constitution being one of the best constitutions in the world, we naturally, that credit goes to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And today, our Konda Madhav Reddy Garu, who is a legend in the Telangana particularly, not only a legal luminary, he was also committed for the upliftment of the poor and weaker sections. As rightly pointed out by Vishwesh Reddy Garu, his focus was on education and even in the fields of health or children, strengthening the children. I being an MLA for twice in this constituency, this AV college supposed to be one of the best renowned and reputed institutions in the city. Not only AV college, Konda Madhav Reddy Garu has come up with a CBI also. There are many such courses introduced in CBI also. Many Varu Madhav Reddy Garu oka goppa mari oka seva sangha samskaruduga తెలంగాణలో అందించిన సేవలు ఈ సమాజానికి మరువలేనటువంటిది. వారి యొక్క మరి కొండ విశ్వేశ్వరరెడ్డి గారు ఆ లెగసీని కంటిన్యూ చేయడానికి రాజకీయాల్లో చేరి పార్లమెంట్ సభ్యుడిగా 2 సార్లు కొనసాగుతూ ఈ యొక్క కోవిడ్ సందర్భంగా మరి ఈ మెమోరియల్ లెక్చర్స్ ఆపడం జరిగింది తప్పితే ప్రతి ఏటా కొనసాగేటువంటి ఈ యొక్క మెమోరియల్ లెక్చర్స్ తద్వారా ఈనాటి ఈ తరానికి రాజ్యాంగం యొక్క విలువలు, జస్టిస్ మాధవరెడ్డి లాంటి వాళ్ళ యొక్క సేవలు, ఈ ప్రాంతం, ఇంతకుముందే చెప్పాను నేను, జస్టిస్ సుదర్శన్ రెడ్డి గారు ద మెయిన్ ఆర్కిటెక్ట్ బిహైండ్ ద ఈ తెలంగాణ మూమెంటు, తెలంగాణ రాష్ట్ర సాధన అవసరాలు ఎందుకనేది వారు బీజం వేశారు. కాబట్టి ఈ సాధించుకున్న తెలంగాణలో మరి అనేక మంది మరి జస్టిస్ మాధవరెడ్డి లాంటి వాళ్ళు, వారి సేవలు ఈ ప్రాంతానికి, డాక్టర్ మర్రి చెన్నారెడ్డి గారు వారు కూడా మరి ఈ ఉమ్మడి ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్కు, ఉత్తరప్రదేశ్ గవర్నర్ కూడా ఏ రకమైన సేవలు అందించారో అటువంటి మరి తెలంగాణ బిడ్డలు అందించినటువంటి సేవలు మరులేని. కాబట్టి ఈ మెమోరియల్ లెక్చర్స్ ద్వారా వాళ్ళ యొక్క జీవిత విశేషాలు ఈనాటి తరానికి తెలియజేస్తూ రాబో రోజుల్లో కూడా తెలంగాణను కూడా అన్ని రంగాల్లో అభివృద్ధి చెందేదానికి, ముందుకు పోవడానికి కూడా ఈ సంస్థ, ఈ ఫౌండేషన్ కూడా ఇంకా అనేక కార్యక్రమాలు చేపడుతుందని చెప్పి, మరి గోదావరి నదీ జలాల వినియోగం విషయంలో డాక్టర్ చెన్నారెడ్డి గారు ఏదైతే పాత్ర పోషించారో ఆ దిశలో మనందరం కూడా ఈ తెలంగాణకు ఉన్నటువంటి వనరులు అవన్నీ కూడా కాపాడుకోవడానికి ఈ ఫౌండేషన్ ద్వారా మనకు స్ఫూర్తిని, ప్రేరణ కల్పిస్తాయని చెప్పి నేను భావిస్తూ ఈ కార్యక్రమంలో పాల్గొని అవకాశం ఇచ్చినటువంటి మిత్రులు, పార్లమెంట్ సభ్యులు విశ్వేశ్వరరెడ్డి గారికి నేను ధన్యవాదాలు చెప్తూ సెలవు తీసుకుంటున్నాను.
It is a great honor to me participate in the Justice Konda Madhav Reddy Memorial Lecture. I personally thank my friend, Member of Parliament Sri Konda Vishweshwar Reddy Garu for visiting me to this program. Late Konda Venkatram Reddy Garu was a freedom fighter, public representative, and served the first Deputy Chief Minister of United Andhra Pradesh. Recognizing the services of late Konda Venkatram Reddy Garu, the government of Andhra Pradesh established a new district on the name of Rangareddy, which was my native district in United Andhra Pradesh. Late Justice Konda Madhav Reddy Garu was a stalwart in the field of judiciary. Besides, he was a great scholar. Justice Konda Madhav Reddy Garu played a key role in the judiciary and as a board member of various educational institutions. He brought reforms in the field of the education. As a censor of the grandfather Sri Konda Vishweshwar Reddy Garu is serving as a member of the parliament at the same time. On the name of his father Justice Konda Madhav Reddy, a trust was formed. The trust is forming various social services such as a free medical camps and improving the condition of the sanitation in 247 government schools in the Eastwhile Rangareddy district. The Konda Madhav Reddy Trust is also working towards the enhancement of the skills and the youth employment generation. Previously, former Chief Justice of India Hansraj Khanna, former Prime Minister of India P.V. Narasimha Rao Garu, Father of the Nation, India Green Revolution M.S. Swaminathan, and number of stalwarts in their representative fields have attended to deliver the Justice Konda Madhav Reddy Memorial Lecture. Dr. Narendra Jadhav is a multi-talented and more respected person. Today's lecture on 55 years of the Constitution making and the role of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar will be help the youth understanding the situation of before the independence. Once again, thank you to all.
It's a great honor. Let me at the very outset state unequivocally that it's a great honor to be presiding on the occasion of Justice Konda Madhav Reddy Memorial Lecture, being delivered by Professor Narendra Jadhav, an eminent economist, an erudite scholar, and a quintessential Ambedkarite. Justice Madhav Reddy was my mentor, guide, philosopher, and a beacon of light in my professional career as well as in my personal life. He was the one who counseled me at every stage of my career, including but not limited to the times when I was in two minds about accepting the position of a justice of the High Court. His immense wisdom, imparted in the gentlest of words and the softest of timbre of voice, were unparalleled in my life. Madhavana, as we members of his extended family, friends, and of course, a huge group of youngsters who looked up to him and admired him, affectionately called him, came from a family that viewed all youngsters, irrespective of their socio-economic background, as their own wards. Now, I'll stop the autobiographical note and say a few words on this occasion. And he carried on that tradition, making us a part of his family. I must add a note here regarding his immediate family as well as his extended family. They imbibed his graciousness and instinctual emotional connect, making us all a part of the family. I have often stated it privately and also publicly. Madhavanna's family was a soul family. For those inspired by him, they have enriched our lives immensely, and I must place my utmost gratitude to all of them, while hastening to add that I do not have the wherewithal to be able to repay. This memorial lecture is being organized on the occasion of the 75th year of the ratification of the Constitution of India. 55th perhaps is a mistake. And I wanted to recall a central aspect of Justice Madhav Reddy's view of his fellow human beings and cite it as an example of the central core of the spirit, the soul of our Constitution. Justice Madhav Reddy was instinctually an empathetic person, and that meant that he recognized the inherent and indefeasible dignity of every human being he came in touch with. He treated everyone who came to his house or office equally and with the same courtesy and affection, whether a person be a constitutional functionary or a poor peasant whose gnarled fingers coax the food we eat out our Mother India. In the various debates that informed the making of our Constitution, one of the questions often asked was whether India would truly run itself as a social democracy. To this, Baba Saheb recalled that India's ancient philosophers had deduced the foundational ontological mantra that could be the true building block of a genuine social democracy, and cited two Mahakavyas from Mandokopanishad, Aham Brahmasvi and Tattvamasi. Baba Saheb conceived the Mahakavyas as a recognition of essential and inherent human dignity in ourselves as well as in everyone else. He pointed out that by the elite of India claiming the first one but forgetting the second, weakened India and wrecked its civilization. The Constitution of India was conceived as a framework for both governance and social relations, marked by solicitousness of the essential dignity of every other Indian. The directive principles of state policy, read along with the fundamental rights, encoded the foregoing and made it foundational to governance. Welfare of fellow citizens was no longer to be dependent on who embodied those principles in their lives and approach to governance and justice, and further nurtured our constitutional endeavors. I cannot but help contrast the attitude of our founding fathers and great men like Justice Madhav Reddy with the shocking things being said even by constitutional functionaries. It was deeply distressing to read some newspaper articles recently in which it was reported that even some learned Supreme Court judges have likened welfare recipients to being quote-unquote parasites. I am not on the point of whether every welfare scheme is appropriate or necessary, nor am I even on the point of whether the Supreme Court can even be an arbiter in such policy matters. But to call welfare schemes freebies, suggesting that the recipients are undeserving of the solicitude of our policymakers and the recipients of welfare are parasites, is to be completely dehumanize our fellow citizens. I can only hope that the newspaper reports were inaccurate or that the learned judges were extremely tired and spoke out without the necessary restraint. However, to hear the language being used by dictatorial oligarchs in other parts of the world to dismantle the social safety nets for those being left behind in the neoliberal economy from our constitutional functionaries is something to be extremely concerned about. I am tempted to recall Faullnariman once said, I quote, amidst the tensions between antagonistic principles, one thing is certain. So long as poverty, dirt continues to stalk the land, and so long as gross disparities between the very rich and the very poor get accentuated as they have in recent years, the ideal of an egalitarian society envisaged in our basic document of governance remains an evanescent dream. Whatever the nation's karma, our founding fathers cannot be faulted for a lack of idealism, nor can providence. It is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are thus. Unquote. It is not because of our constitution, but despite its provisions, that as a nation we have failed to fulfill what were naively assumed to be achievable goals. We, the people of India.
Why am I talking about 55 years of constitution making? I don't blame people who get baffled by the title 55 years of constitution making. Most people believe that the Indian constitution was written during the period 1946 to 1950. That was the period when Samvidhan Sabha, the Constituent Assembly, was working to create the Constitution of India. However, this statement is only half truth. In reality, the Indian Constitution was an outcome of a 55-year-long process of constitutional reforms starting way back in 1895. That is why 55. Do you know there were two parallel tracks? The process began in 1895, and I'm going to talk about this entire process. As a matter of fact, there were two parallel tracks of constitutional reforms, one from the British rulers and the second one from Indian leaders. And these two parallel tracks finally merged together in 1946 when the Constituent Assembly was formed, and that led finally to India becoming a democratic republic in January 1950. Now, let us look at this. In this JKMR Memorial Lecture, I would like to offer a historical perspective on the evolution of Indian Constitution. I assure you that this journey is quite exciting. It has many ups and downs and interspersed with a lot of surprises that I hope you will find fascinating. In all, there were as many as 12 major attempts at making Indian Constitution. And guess who was one leader? Who was common to most, if not all, of these 12 efforts? Not Mahatma Gandhi, not Jawaharlal Nehru, not Sardar Patel. It was indomitable Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar who was the common factor in most of these efforts at making the Indian Constitution. That is why I have titled my address today as 55 years of constitution making in India, the role of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. So, ladies and gentlemen, let the journey begin. The first attempt at constitution making, you will be surprised, was inspired by Lokmanya Tilak. The year was 1895, and there was a Swaraj Bill of 1895, and this was promoted by Miss Annie Besant, and it was considered the first articulation of constitutional imagination of Indian people. This constitution laid down number of things, including citizens' rights, freedom of expression, right to property. Curiously, this draft constitution also included provision for right to bear arms, which was, of course, unlikely to be accepted. This constitution was remarkable in the sense that it had a provision of compulsory primary education way back in 1895. This was the first attempt which did not go anywhere. The second attempt, very significant attempt, it came from in the form of Government of India Act of 1919. First was the Indian effort, now the first major effort by the British rulers. That happened with the Government of India Act of 1919. This pivotal legislation was a turning point This pivotal legislation, Government of India Act of 1919, was a turning point in the process of continuous reforms, and it came about from what is called Chelmsford and Montague reforms. Now this one, the British government made a historic announcement in 2017 that they were beginning the era of progressive realization of responsible government of a limited character in India. And this historic announcement was made. That was the first partial freedom was given to Indians. And that happened in 2017. Now, see the destiny. As the luck would have it, after this announcement was made, there was a Southborough committee was sent to formulate the what we call delimitation exercise now, but to talk about the franchise. It was the franchise committee led by Lord. Now this particular provision, it happened at a very interesting time. Dr. Ambedkar was a student studying in London at that time, and because he was denied extension of scholarship, he was compelled to come back to India. And 1 week after the announcement for partial autonomy was made, Dr. Ambedkar arrived in India. Look at the destiny. And when the Southborough Committee came, Dr. Ambedkar, as a 26-year-old young man, made a presentation before the Southborough's Committee. And what did he argue? Southborough's Committee, he argued before the Southborough's Committee that the franchise should be made as broad as possible. Earlier, it was very narrow, it was confined to only 3% people. Dr. Ambedkar was the one who said that the franchise should be made as broad as possible. He was little short of saying that there should be adult franchise, universal adult franchise. Look at this. At that time in 1919, even United States did not have universal adult franchise. Women did not have right to vote in America in 1919. That happened in the year following, 1920. And here was this young man, 26 years old, who made a presentation before a foreign government that there should be almost an universal adult franchise. That was the first spark that he showed as far as the constitution making is concerned. So Dr. Ambedkar's testimony before the Southborough's Committee was truly phenomenal, and it will go down in the history as a remarkable testimony by a very young scholar who, for a historical reason, because administratively he could not continue his higher education. That's why he came back and made a presentation, and then after a few years, 2-3 years, he went back and completed his education. That was the second attempt. The third attempt at constitution making in India also took place came from Indians. That's called the Commonwealth of India Bill of 1925. This was promoted by Ms. Annie Besant, and this was a full-fledged constitution prepared for the first time, and it had 127 articles. It was a fairly big one, including fundamental rights. It had all these provisions. It was supposed to be presented. It was presented in the British Parliament by a leader of Labour Party in December 1925. But as the luck would have it, there was a change of government. The Labour Party was thrown out of power, and Tories came to power. And in that process, this bill was never discussed. So that was the third attempt at constitution making. Now we turn to the fourth attempt at constitution making. The fourth attempt at constitution making came with the appointment of Simon Commission. As you are aware, Labour Party in UK, they appointed in 1927, they appointed a 7-member commission called the Indian Statutory Commission. This was led by Mr. Simon, Lord Simon, and therefore it's called Simon Commission. Simon Commission was resented by everybody in India because the commission came to decide the destiny of our country, but it did not have a single Indian member. So there was a lot of reaction everywhere. Simon, go back, were the slogans given, and he was hooted out wherever he went. He had meetings with number of people, but it did not lead to anything. And in fact, there were hartals, there were morchas, there was a widespread discontent because Simon Commission did not have support of Indian people, because there was not a single Indian present in the Simon Commission. In fact, during one of those hartals, a lathi charge was made, and one of the great Indian leaders died in that. Bal, Pal, and the three great leaders at that time, one of them died in the process. Lala Lajpat Rai. Lala Lajpat Rai died in that lathi charge while opposing the Simon Commission. Now, Dr. Ambedkar refused not to participate. He decided to participate. He gave a statement and testimony before the Simon Commission, and that Simon Commission testimony was very important. When the British government saw that Indians are not enthusiastic about it, they appointed a subcommittee to go to various states and talk to the leaders. At that time, Dr. Ambedkar was just nominated to the Bombay Province Assembly, not Assembly, Vidhan Parishad. So he was part of the assembly at that time, nominated member, and he chose to present before even the committee which was sent, subcommittee which was sent to the state, and he gave a testimony before that too. That while the Simon Commission report came out, Dr. Ambedkar was not happy with the report at all. He submitted his own big report for Simon Commission, but Simon Commission's report as a whole did not cut any ice because there was no support from Indian people at large. So therefore, that could not happen. And therefore, that could not happen. When that did not happen, the next thing to happen was the British said that if you don't want our report, if you don't accept Simon Commission report, why don't you, they challenged the Indians, why don't you create a constitutional draft of yourself? And that challenge was accepted by the then Congress party. And then the committee was appointed under the chairmanship of Motilal Nehru. That was the 5th attempt. Motilal Nehru Committee, and that was a very interesting committee. That committee had many great leaders, including, Motilal Nehru was the chair, but Subhash Chandra Bose was the member of that committee. And who was the secretary of that committee? The young, dynamic Jawaharlal Nehru was the secretary of that committee. The Motilal Nehru Committee report came out in 1928, and it recommended a dominion status of complete internal self-government. It also recommended a federal setup for government. It recommended elections under universal suffrage and a Bill of Rights called Fundamental Rights. So all that, they also recommended for the first time, detailed fundamental rights, including giving equal rights to women. This was really a landmark development. However, Dr. Ambedkar was not in favor of Motilal Nehru Committee report. What he said was that this committee report may appear to be good because it has all these fundamental rights listed. But what is the guarantee that these fundamental rights would be implemented? There is no assurance of implementation of these fundamental rights. And many years later, and there are so many judicial experts and judges sitting here, you'll recall, sir, that there is this Article 32 in Indian Constitution which gives ordinary citizens access directly to the Supreme Court if there is a violation of fundamental rights. So Dr. Ambedkar introduced that many years later as Article 32 and called that article as the heart and soul of Indian Constitution. Just announcement of fundamental rights by itself is nothing unless an ordinary citizen has access directly to the Supreme Court in case of violation of their fundamental rights. So Dr. Ambedkar criticized Motilal Nehru Committee report because it did not have that kind of access. That brings us to, even within the Congress party, Motilal Nehru Committee report was challenged. Why was it challenged? Because it talked about dominion status. Whereas the dominant thinking in Congress party at that time was Purna Swaraj, complete independence. And Motilal Nehru Committee was talking about dominating this status, dominion status, that is internal freedom within the British Empire, that was not acceptable to young and dynamic people in the Congress. And the brigade was led by none other than Jawaharlal Nehru against his own father's report, Motilal Nehru Committee report.
ఈ వీడియో మీకు నచ్చినట్టయితే లైక్ చేయండి, 10 మందికి షేర్ చేయండి. అలాగే కామెంట్ల రూపంలో మీ అభిప్రాయాలను మాతో పంచుకోండి. నేషనలిస్ట్ హబ్ గ్రూప్ ఆఫ్ ఛానల్స్ ను సబ్స్క్రైబ్ చేసుకుని తెలుగునాట జాతీయవాద జర్నలిజాన్ని ప్రోత్సహించండి. ఈ వీడియో కింద ఉన్న బెల్ ఐకాన్ పై క్లిక్ చేయడం మర్చిపోవద్దు.